Let's take a look at a couple of those examples. So here we see something where they're claiming that cancer is a fungus, that baking soda is the perfect remedy for it because cancer loves acid, and everybody knows the opposite of acid is baking soda, and how that's going to cure cancer and it's cheap and they're just hiding it because it's cheap. But let's think about this a little bit. First of all, they're just misunderstanding the Warburg effect. Also, the one little bit of credit I gotta give from is baking soda probably could kill cancer in a petri dish. But lots of things can kill cancer in a petri dish. If you want to use enough baking soda to kill a tumor in an actual patient, you'd have to use enough baking soda that it would kill the patient first. So just a bit of an issue. We have ivermectin being advertised as a cure for everything these days. Like it's this little old cure-all. It cures cancer here, but I've also seen that it cured COVID, or that it could be just a general health supplement. And who knows, maybe it even still cures the thing it was originally invented to cure. Some like parasite or something. But I don't know, it's just a miracle cure, so we can just use it for everything. Another actually really common thing is that they'll talk about some sort of toxin where this toxin could cure cancer. Again, in a petri dish, sure, it can kill cancer cells. I have no doubt about that. But whether or not it's going to kill the patient first, I mean, do you really want to be inflicted with the Pharaoh's curse? It'll kill the cancer, but it's probably going to kill you too. And then they also really love these kind of natural sounding remedies where it's like, oh, it comes from the root of this plant, like a dandelion or something. And again, could you make something from a dandelion root that could potentially have medicinal properties? Sure. But it's not this one to one easy comparison that they make it out to be because cancer is complicated. And we're going to get into some funner examples in a bit. But first, we got to look at some of the impacts as to why I think this is important, in addition to just how ridiculous it is. And it's that a lot of people believe it. These are all comments from YouTube videos on different cancer related topics. And it's just, I agree, the pharma companies don't want to cure. Or a news report that had an interesting development where they interviewed a scientist on the research he was doing, and 1 year later, nothing's been made available. And there's more comments below that talking about how, oh yeah, well now it's 3 years later since this video, and nothing's been available to the people. And I have this comment from another video where there's no money in healthy people, and this one here. And finally, this one actually really kind of makes me laugh because anybody who makes these types of claims that all the scientists are being killed does not understand how science works. Like they just kind of picture that it's like this lone scientist in his basement doing science stuff, and he discovers the cure, and but because he was in the basement by himself, the shadow government could get to him. And while I don't do biochemistry research anymore since I've switched since my undergrad, I can tell you that their research process in terms of how they work is very similar to the one that I do. And if I was doing something that a shadow government decided that I needed to die for, they wouldn't just have to get me. They'd have to get me. They'd have to get my entire research group. If I was doing something really cool, they'd likely have to get any scientist who's ever talked to me. And if they really want to be safe, they better get anybody that I have talked to since I started doing this research, because I'm finding excuses to bring that up to everybody if I'm working on something that cool. Like I'm talking to a random guy on the bus and telling him about my cool research. And so it's not just going to be one man disappearing. It's going to be entire like companies disappearing is what this would actually look like if they're really killing the people who made cool discoveries. And so with that, now we get to some actual, a little bit more lighthearted examples that'll hopefully be a little bit funnier, a little bit more entertaining. In that, I want to show you how you can use examples from House MD and how they kind of accidentally portray cancer in such a way as well as the fact that WebMD used to always tell you it was cancer, which, to be clear, it doesn't anymore. We need to go back to the version that this skit was inspired by. So, to go with the house example first, let's introduce our main character. He's a detective. He goes through, he's basically Sherlock Holmes. And he really likes solving complex medical mysteries. He's a bit of a jerk as he does it, but he always gets his man in the end, or in this case, his disease in the end.
You should never keep.
All right, let's check out the pilot
And I
episode.
told mine, cut back.
We can see almost immediately we're getting some wild symptoms. An otherwise healthy teacher is just lost the ability to speak completely. One of the things I want you to keep in mind from one of my future points is this was a pilot episode. This was everything that the show writers wanted to have in every disease that they featured on the show. At the end of all of this, somebody else finally recognizes something is wrong, and she's brought to the hospital. Which is now where our main character comes in with his helpful crew of misfit doctor minions that will go about and will try to solve this medical mystery. So they go through, they talk to the patient, they get a history, they find out what symptoms he's experiencing, and get as much information as they can. And as they do that, House, again, he's a jerk. He may or may not interact with the patient. He just kind of does his own thing, and it's kind of funny sometimes. But they consult, they come up with a treatment plan, they try it. Since it's early enough in the show, it invariably goes wrong, and House is unhappy with that, and new symptoms come up. And this pattern repeats a couple of times until the doctors begin panicking. And House begins to put it all together. As he thinks and as he goes about all of this, eventually all of the puzzle pieces fit. The other doctors kind of get out of the way, basically. I mean, some of the episodes, they feature a little bit more, but it's all about the main character. It's all about House most of the time. And he goes and he gives the treatment, and it works, and that's the end of the episode, and he's caught his bad guy. Which, on that note, I do feel like it's worth pointing out that the show really did do a lot of research in how it portrays these diseases. And the actual, can this disease cause this symptom, is almost always pretty accurate. The medical ethics, not so much. But if you want more details on this, I've actually included a link in a Google Doc to a blog of a teacher that was going through, or not a teacher, a doctor that was going through and was evaluating the medical accuracy of each show. And my takeaways from both that as well as discussion with undergrad professors that would bring the show up on occasion is that, again, the show is pretty accurate. The one kind of major flaw is that it is a drama, and so occasionally you got to kind of give the disease its fourth wall breaking powers to where it will cause its symptoms when it wants to cause its symptom to cause the most drama. But in terms of can this disease actually cause these symptoms, the answer is almost always yes. It does quite a good job. And so with that, what are our takeaways? Again, it's more of a procedural crime drama that's kind of disguised as a medical show. Again, they're catching bad guys, and by bad guys we need diseases. And what they need in this show, and what their goal every single time, was to find a disease that was absolutely wild. They want you to have diseases where they go through and they have somebody who's seeing sounds and hearing colors, who can only talk gibberish like in the pilot. And so on that note, let's recreate the Google search that led me down this rabbit hole. And so we arrive at the conclusion of this. It's cancer. It's always cancer, apparently. The show goes through and 24 times. 4 times as much as the next most common diagnosis is cancer. Most diagnoses on the show only show up once. They don't basically ever reuse a diagnosis, but they constantly reuse cancer. And why is that? Well, to help you understand that, now we're going to turn to WebMD, hence why I have both of them on this slide.
What is it, Doc?
You have cancer.
How could you possibly know that?
Oh, I tell everyone they have cancer.
Let's talk a little bit about how it works. So essentially, it takes this bank of diseases, it just looks through this entire database of all the diseases that it has entered in, and compares the symptoms of those diseases to the patient's reported symptoms. So you enter in a symptom, it changes what diseases it thinks it could be. You enter in more symptoms, it changes it even more. Until finally, you get through and you get done entering all the diseases you think it could be, and it kind of arbitrarily ranks them as to what diseases it thinks is the most probable. And as you can already read in the one that I initially made kind of small, cancer could theoretically cause all of the symptoms there. In fact, if we enter in another set of symptoms, cancer could cause all of these symptoms as well. Same with these. Finally, we can take this a step further. If you want, you can pause the video and Google any symptom you can think of and ask, could this be caused by cancer? And pretty much every time the answer will be yes. It may not be the most probable answer. You go through and enter in that you have a cough or a cold or a slight fever, and it's not likely to be caused by cancer. But you can't completely rule it out either based off of just the symptom, because cancer could theoretically cause any of those symptoms. Which is why WebMD can never rule it out, because cancer is complicated. It can literally cause any symptom you can think of. And so when you enter in your symptoms, WebMD goes, cancer could cause that. And because cancer is so serious, it gets bumped up to the top of the list, per their old algorithm. So let's talk a little bit about different classifications of cancer and why is it that it can cause so many symptoms. So if we go through, we have all sorts of cancers and whatnot. I'm going to focus on skin cancer because I'm so white that I could literally get burned by the indoor lights. So yeah, that one's always a little bit on the forefront of my mind. You can further subdivide this into different carcinomas and melanomas. Your melanomas are typically your more dangerous ones. They cause much more deaths. Before I go too deep down this ADHD rabbit hole, my point of this is that there are literally thousands of types of cancer. And if we want to classify them all, it's not just one type of cancer. There is too many to really talk about in a short video. But if you really want to understand cancer, it's actually worse than that. There's even more than just the classified types of cancers. There's technically like infinite cancers. And so let's explain why that is. So we need to talk about how does your normal cells become cancer. You start off with normal cells, something happens in this little arrow, and then they become cancer. And so to think about this, let's look at your DNA. As you undoubtedly are already familiar with if you've had even high school level of science education, your DNA is essentially kind of instructions for your cell. It tells your cell how to behave, what sort of things to do, what sort of things to make, all of that sort of good stuff. And as we go through, the first step in turning a cell into a cancer cell is to mutate the DNA, usually by being exposed to different carcinogens. And as it's exposed to different carcinogens, that DNA mutates and can start to do different things. But what type of mutations do we typically get? I'll talk about a couple. That there are a lot more that could be a video in and of itself, but some of the most common ones that people talk about is it needs the ability to evade or ignore the immune system, because otherwise Osmosis Jones over here is going to come and kill your cancer cell before it becomes actually dangerous, which happens every day in your body. So yeah, that's kind of the first step that needs to happen. Then you have changes to regulation, again, because now there are 2 of them, now there are 4 of them, now there are 8 of them, so on and so forth. It needs to be able to divide quickly, and if it's going to be an issue. If it's dividing quickly, it also needs to have a source of energy for that. So you got to have changes to the cell's metabolism. It needs to be able to get energy from all sorts of sources, whatever sources are available. And it needs to be able to do that on its own terms and not be dictated by other potential cell signals. Finally, the last one that I'll mention that can make cancer particularly difficult to treat is that you can get mutations that allow the cells to break off and invade other tissues, which is called metastasis. And as a whole, these types of genes that have to change in order for a cancer cell to be a cancer cell, we typically refer to these as oncogenes. And these oncogenes came from your own unique DNA. The cancer cell is your own unique mutated DNA. The fact that your own DNA is involved makes it a unique thing. Do you think that only the oncogenes are the genes that are mutating? Probably not. In fact, a lot of cancers often have mutations that are not necessarily resulted with oncogenes, where you can have different types of things where hormones can go crazy because of the cancer and all sorts of weird complications depending on what mutations end up in the DNA. So this is really what makes cancer so hard to treat. The fact that it's so unique that it comes from your own DNA. And so the next time somebody tells you that they're hiding the cure for cancer or asks, when are they going to cure cancer? You can tell them, we already have. In fact, we've cured millions of cancers. We just, unfortunately, have billions left to go. So here we have some data that shows how much we've improved at treating cancer over the years. So this graph here is the rate of the occurrence of certain events per 100,000. And these are years from 1975 to 2020. And if we look at this data, we can see some general trends. We can see that the rate that we have been diagnosed with cancer has generally been increasing for a variety of reasons. However, despite the fact that we've been being diagnosed with cancer more often, the rate at which we're dying from cancer is still going down. To put it a slightly different way, this data was taken and put into this graph, and what they did is they took the total number of deaths reported from cancer each year and graphed that with this blue line for both men and women. And what they did is, based off of the predicted death rates for the different types of cancers that was occurring in 1990, 1991 or so, they made a prediction as to how many people would have died had we not improved in our treatment. And the number of deaths averted at this point is approaching 5 million, 4.7, 4.8 or so. That's a lot of people that would have died. And if you'll permit me to get on my soapbox one last time, this is one of the reasons why this really annoys me, is even though I don't do biochemistry research anymore, I have worked with a lot of people that do, and a lot of people that are dedicating their lives to solving these types of problems. And so when we go through and come up with these conspiracies that cancer has this simple cure and it's just being hidden from us, what you're effectively doing is you're calling these people that have dedicated their lives to solving this tragically hard problem, you're calling them either idiots or you're calling them liars. Because either they know and they're keeping it hidden, or they're not smart enough to figure it out. The fact that these people have dedicated their lives to such a worthy goal, I think they should be celebrated, that we should be acknowledging these nearly 5 million people they've saved. Not creating conspiracies that suggest, well, they've been keeping the good stuff hidden from us. All right, I'll step off my soapbox for now. But here's what I hope you take away from this. That cancer is a really difficult thing to treat. It can literally cause any symptom you can think of. And it's going to be unique every single time to some degree, as unique as the person who's diagnosed with it. And I've also shown you a couple of ways that you can kind of demonstrate this uniqueness. The fact that HouseMD, a show that almost never repeated diseases, used cancer 24 times because it was kind of this Swiss Army knife that could cause any symptoms they wanted it to cause. And finally, you hopefully now also understand why WebMD also always said it was cancer. And on that note, we'll end things here.